Hey guys, good morning and thanks for checking out your latest agricultural weather outlook here. Michael Clark with BAM Weather and the Weather Portal. Got a lot to discuss today. I know a lot of the reports coming out here of the delayed planting and just the really unfavorable pattern that we've been in to get out into the fields and get work done. You know, we've been telling our customers really for the better part of the last 6 weeks that it wasn't really going to become more of a favorable pattern to get out there and get work done until mid-May. And that's about close because we've got a few more storm systems to deal with. We've got an active week 1 here with precipitation. Luckily, what's happened is the model data at least has rolled forward and trended warmer, and we're not looking at some frost and freeze threats here later this week. But it's still looking wet and active. I want to get right into it here. So let's take a look at everything we've got going. First and foremost, we do have our webinar. I want you to sign up for that. It's May 11th at 11 a.m. It's free. Our sign-up links are all over our social media pages, so feel free to check that out and get a much more detailed look into what the growing season forecast might look like. Okay, so here's a look at our rainfall over the last 5 days. And you can see we have locations in here from the Dakotas through much needed rain here through Nebraska and through portions of Iowa and Missouri that have gotten quite a bit of rain, inch, 2, even locally 3 inches of rain. Sporadically still wet even in the eastern Corn Belt, where it hasn't been as wet lately, but we're still getting plagued with these rain systems every 5 to 7 days that are keeping things just muddy for the most part, but not as bad the further east you go, if you will, in terms of the last couple of days. The temperature and rainfall departures, this was really for the last 30 days for April in general. You know, very cool end here for the entire growing region in terms of temperatures, the departure there from normal, and record wet here in the northern plains. I mean, just incredibly wet up here. Just some of the wettest April on record for some places here in the northern plains. And over the last 30 days, we've started to see indications of wetter, at least wetter, pattern through this area here. Now, some places have not been as wet, some a little bit wetter, but going forward the next couple of days, it's certainly not going to get any drier. Okay, this here is a look at our week 1 and our week 2 kind of overviews that we send out in the morning, our morning ag weather reports. And I want you to note a couple of things. Several cold fronts, several storm dates, several systems in the mix here between now and the 20th of May that are going to continue to offer up rain and shots of cooler air mixed in with these. But at the same time, there's also a pretty legitimate shot at a warm-up coming as well. It's going to keep the pattern active. I'm going to tell you something. Whenever you see a map that looks like this, I mean, with all the warmth east and the cold back out into the west, it's going to be active in between. It's just the way it's going to be. And that's kind of how that map looks there, in week 2. It's kind of how the data is looking. So what does our data say? Well, if I had to favor one model over another right now, it would be the European model. It trended quite a bit wetter last night for the week 1 period overall. The GFS is a little bit wetter further north than the other data. It's a little bit of an outlier in that regard for precipitation there across upward towards the northern plains. But very, very wet here across the I-states, really, where a lot of field work needs to be done. It's very, very wet. I kind of want to time this out for you. Look at a couple of these storm systems going forward. First and foremost, obviously, it's the one we're dealing with today, right now, that brought the severe weather across Oklahoma and whatnot yesterday. This area of low pressure is going to continue to move east and bring rain and storms with it. It's currently right now centered over Iowa, Wisconsin, northern Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, getting rain here this morning on radar. That front moves through. The next one works in here Wednesday afternoon into Thursday morning across the central plains, where heavy rain will break out, thunderstorms, severe weather. We're looking at multi-day severe weather event down there in the south central plains. And then as we go forward, you can see this system spreads east again for a very wet Friday across the I-states, really, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, portions of Michigan. Just a big widespread rain here into the weekend. That rain departs by Saturday night. Sunday gets a little bit nicer. But we're even looking at another possible storm system in the northern plains in day 5, day 6 here, possibly closer to day 7, but the European and the GFS both seeing that. If we go beyond 7 days, all right, the European gets a little bit quieter in the main growing regions of central U.S. Perhaps there may be an opportunity to get out into the field later next week. It's all going to depend on how much drying needs to happen. That's just something we don't know. We can't answer that for you. But here's a look at precip. All right, here's a look at 7-day precip. And again, these are pretty healthy numbers across Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas. Big rains here for Kansas and Missouri, but a widespread 1 to 3 inches of rain the next 7 days certainly dialed up. And when you compare that to the normal, many locations here are going to be running well above the normal. So over the next week, in terms of planting progress, there's probably not going to be much of it. There's really just no way that's going to be possible to get out and do much over the next week. So we need to target kind of when will that window open up for that to happen. Well, interestingly enough, we have a big divide in the data, really in the week 2 and beyond, day 7 and beyond. The European is doing something quite a bit different with our global wind pattern than the American ensemble data is doing. And so with that being said, the result is the GEFS is quite a bit wetter in the 6 to 10 and the 11 to 15 day period, to whereas the European is not. It's not nearly as wet. It still would suggest we have some storm systems, and I'm not saying it's not going to rain, but it's drier, not as aggressive with the above normal rainfall there in week 2. And so, when you have the two doing kind of separate things with our global wind patterns, we've got to look at other things to try and help come up with answers to that as well, right? And so I think what I would like to do is I would like to show you that and, kind of look at some other methods here. This is the MJO, all right? And what this is telling us is essentially, this is our tropical forcing pattern, or our what the tropics tell us for kind of how it drives weather patterns here across the U.S. is the easiest way I can describe that. Currently, the tropical forcing, the pattern, the forcing here, we are in MJO phase 3. Okay, there's no doubt about that. MJO phase 3 is wet. We're seeing that this week. There's no question about it. And it's cooler, right? We're cooler this week in terms of temperatures. We know we're in phase 3. The European model, the GFS, what they are both doing is taking our MJO into a pretty strong phase 6 here by midweek 2. European, you can see propagating through those phases rather quickly as it moves across the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And what happens is, for a brief time, phase 4 and phase 5 you can see is a little bit less active. But what happens in phase 6 is some of the activity backs out west into the plains. The plains become a little bit more active, still seeing rainfall chances. And the east gets a little bit drier. But the big thing that happens is the warm-up. Phase 6 gets really, really warm. And that's kind of the motivation here of showing you the temperatures as well, because in the 6 to 10 and the 11 to 15, we're trying to warm it up. The GEFS, I believe, is too cool in this event. And that's why I think overall we're going to side more, European lean here. Because when you look at the MJO, it's almost as if the GEFS is kind of ignoring that signal a little bit or missing it for a moment. And that's why I like the European a little bit better in this situation. So all things considered, when we look at our actual week 2, week 3, and 4 forecast here, we're going to continue to keep the pattern active here in the central U.S. Normal to above normal rainfall is going to be favored, where it could turn a little bit drier here in the far east, the eastern third of the country, but not incredibly encouraging signals for fields to dry out and planters to get rolling and activity to start out there. It's not incredibly encouraging for that. And like I said, anytime we have these gradients of really warm east and cooler to the west, we're going to be active here in the central portion of the country. So our week 2 forecast is kind of in the middle between the two pieces of data there, and tropical forcing and the global wind pattern, what we call the angular momentum. For those of you that are curious, what that means. So Week 3 and 4 was updated today as well. You know, it really kind of keeps the theme of pretty active up and through the central and northern plains. All right, with continued shots of cooler air, because if the MJO goes into 6 and then goes back through 7, 8, 1, which it probably can and will do, you're going to continue to keep at least the risk for cool shots in the mix before, I think, you know, any sustained major warmth coming is not really in the cards right now. It's just not a thing that we're talking about. And in our analog package, as we get further into the growing season, you know, that's not really something we're not talking about a super hot summer, okay, or a super dry summer. Those aren't things we're talking about right now, okay. Real quick, before I get beyond this or into the summer idea, I do want to touch on the safrinha corn crop down in South America here in Brazil. It's still not looking good. Temperatures, well, they're not cooking it. They're about average. But precip the next 10 days still continuing to run well below the average. In many locations, just not going to see rain. The monsoonal rains are over. It's worst case scenario for the second corn crop there in safrinha, the safrinha corn crop. So just an FYI in that regard. Okay. But listen, the summer analog package, what I mentioned here just a moment ago, the risk is the dryness in the central plains. Okay. The risk is some type of dome of heat or area of high pressure that sets up and keeps it dry in the middle, and then takes precipitation up over the top into the east and keeps it cooler in the east. So, you know, if you're in the eastern corn belt, if you're in the eastern half of the corn and soybean belts, gosh, a cooler and wetter summer could be dialed up for the way we're seeing things right now. The warmer and drier risks are definitely the western half or western third and the central plains here for the primary U.S. growing regions going forward. So we've got better weather than now coming next week, but it's still not completely dry. And so it's really going to come down to a case-by-case scenario. Decision everyone will have to make on their own, right? You know, we can't make those decisions for you. So, again, check out our social media links for the webinar registration. All right, that is the 11th at 11 a.m. We'll talk more in depth about the growing season forecast and what all that entails, guys. So, thanks for checking out our video today. Let us know if you have any questions. Have a great day.